Blender is an extremely powerful program. You could make just about any character or animation you can possibly dream of using its expansive toolset. But when you're just starting out, it feels like the software is fighting against you. We've all been there. Maybe your rig won't bind to your character, geometry will disappear, textures look glitchy, and you've wasted hours of time that you could have spent learning and creating new stuff. That's why I've designed this video to be the ultimate guide for new Blender users that you can revisit over and over again throughout your Blender journey. Even intermediate Blender artists are going to pick up some really useful stuff in this video. And that's because after teaching Blender for a few years now, I've noticed a pattern. And that pattern is that 80% of the time, your Blender problem can be solved using one of the 10 things that we're about to discuss in this video. Knowing how to solve these issues will save you hours upon hours of time so that you can focus on the fun part, making cool new stuff. Plus, this video has an accompanying PDF guide with tons of quick fixes that we're about to talk about in this video, along with example images and so much more. You can download this guide to your smartphone, tablet, or computer and use it to solve most of the common Blender problems that arise. And the best part about this guide is that I've made it super affordable. It costs nothing. This guide is 100% free, so make sure to download it today using that link in the description box below this video. But without further ado, let's jump right into it. Before we get into the most common Blender issues and how to fix them in just seconds, make sure to stick around to the end of this video because I asked many of the highly experienced Blender artists in my Discord server what advice they'd give themselves when they first started learning Blender. And I was just blown away by how much their advice could help new Blender creators save time. But before that, let's jump right into number one, which is one of the most common Blender issues of all time. Do you have weird artifacts, models not binding to your rig, or messy shading? You might have duplicate vertices or overlapping faces. This is an extremely common problem because it's extremely easy to have this by mistake, and faces stacked on top of each other often cause Z-fighting, which is the flickering/shimmering look you see here. Duplicate vertices can cause issues when modeling, rigging your characters, using your modifiers, and in a lot of other situations. To fix this problem with all your objects selected, go into Edit mode, then press A to select all. Now press M, then click the Merge by Distance operator. Adjust the merge distance value if needed, and you fixed your problem. To prevent this, I'd recommend going into wireframe mode by pressing Z and then clicking wireframe. Doing this, then zooming in to inspect your geometry is a great habit to get into. Plus, using X-ray in Blender is a great way to resolve modeling issues and troubleshoot in general. Be mindful when pressing the E key in Blender, which is extrude, because if you press it and don't move your mouse, you will still make new geometry at times, which can cause problems. Another really important thing to keep in mind when you run into rigging and modeling errors are the differences between tris, quads, and n-gons. A general rule of thumb in 3D modeling is to use quads, which are polygons with 4 vertices and 4 edges, in your topology as much as possible, because quads make various modeling and rigging operations much easier to manage. With that said, using tris, which are polygons with 3 vertices and 3 edges, is totally fine for low poly models that don't need to be subdivided. In a similar vein, strategically using tris in areas where they don't cause issues when subdivided, such as in the knees and elbows of your characters so that you can get a better bend, is totally fine as well. However, n-gons, which are geometry with more than 4 vertices or edges, should be avoided in your final 3D models as much as possible, as they can lead to numerous problems when modeling or rigging characters or basically any 3D model. If you'd like to check if your 3D model has any n-gons in Blender, all you need to do is go to Edit mode, make sure you're on Face Select, then from the top menu in the 3D viewport, press Select, then find the Select by Trait dropdown and do Faces by Sides. Click on that, then unselect extend, set your type to greater than, and set your number of vertices to 4. Because n-gons are always more than 4 vertices, this will highlight and automatically select all the n-gons you have on your model. If you don't see anything selected, perfect. That means you don't have any n-gons on your model and you're good to start adding modifiers and rigging your model. Rotating, moving, and scaling your objects in object mode can cause various issues when you're rigging, exporting your models, or applying modifiers to them. This most commonly causes issues with the mirror modifier. If you've ever had objects in Blender not mirror from the center of your scene as expected, this is why. That's why it's usually recommended to rotate, scale, and move your object in edit mode when you're 3D modeling rather than doing so in object mode. As a result, it is best practice to apply all transforms on your object before doing rigging or modifier operations to be safe rather than sorry. To apply this fix, with all your objects selected in object mode, apply their location, rotation, and scale by pressing Ctrl+A and clicking all transforms. This resets your location, rotation, and scale values, which will fix a lot of the issues you might run into when it comes to rigging your model and also applying modifiers to your model. You can check the values on your object in the End panel, also known as the Transform tab, to make sure your transform, scale, and rotation values were reset. To avoid this issue, make sure to do most of your transforms in edit mode rather than object mode, and apply these transforms before using modifiers and starting the rigging process on your model. This one seems odd, but because of some poor UX design in Blender, it's one of the most common student mistakes. Parts of your mesh seem to just disappear. This is due to pressing H by accident, which is an extremely easy mistake to make considering that move in Blender is G. Fix this, press Alt+H in edit or object mode to unhide everything. Just keep in mind that you can hide verts, faces, and edges individually in edit mode, separately from object mode where you can only hide objects. If you're still missing stuff, make sure to go to the outliner panel and click any closed eye icons. Another reason why geometry may seem to disappear at certain angles is because of face orientation. Think of each face on your model as having a front and a back side. This is visualized in Blender by enabling the face orientation option under viewport overlays in the 3D viewport. The blue color visualized here are front faces and the red color are for back faces. Backface visibility or backface culling is a material setting that hides the back sides of faces, which make them transparent. This is a common practice to improve performance and prevent visual clutter, as you generally don't need to see the inside of a closed object. Certain modifiers in Blender, like the solidify modifier, depend on face orientation to determine which direction to add thickness, meaning that incorrectly oriented faces can really lead to a messy mesh, and some rigging operations in Blender rely upon face orientation as well. So knowing about face orientation is really good when troubleshooting different modeling issues. You can flip a face's orientation, also known as its normals, by pressing Alt+N and clicking flip, but we're going to talk about normals in more depth later on in this video. To prevent this problem, you can remap the hide command from H to Shift+H using the key map editor in Blender if you're hitting it a lot by accident, or you can simply press Alt+H to unhide all in edit mode or object mode. If movement, scaling, or rotation seem a little messed up, like your mesh is either moving like Jello or way more than your active selection is kind of following along with it, this may be because you've turned on proportional editing. Proportional editing is turned on by pressing O, and you can use it in both object mode and edit mode. To turn it off, all you do is press O again, or you can click that little blue icon with a circle pattern at the top of your 3D viewport. You can also adjust the influence radius of your proportional editing by using the scroll wheel. Do objects, faces, or vertices on your model suddenly snap to grids or teleport to other geometry while you're moving it around? This most often occurs because of an accidental Shift+Tab press, because that turns on snapping. To fix this, all you need to do is press Shift+Tab again to turn snapping off, or you can click the magnet icon in the top bar of your 3D viewport. To prevent this, you can either press Ctrl+Shift+Tab to quickly change your snapping settings, or just press Shift+Tab again to turn snapping off. In a similar vein to hiding things by pressing H by mistake, if you accidentally press any of the number keys on your keyboard from 1 to 9, suddenly a ton of objects in your scene might just disappear. To fix this, you can either press Ctrl+C to undo your action, or you can go to the outliner to click the eye icon next to the collection you want visible once again. To prevent this, you can unbind every hide collection hotkey in the key map editor if they're causing you headaches, and honestly, I do this myself because I find this action just practically useless in the year of our Lord 2025. By the way, if you found this video helpful so far, make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to watch future videos that go over the fundamentals of character modeling in 3D animation in Blender. And turn on notifications to get updated when more informative videos just like this one drop. One of the most universal, frustrating experience for new Blender users is Blender crashing, which causes you to lose hours of work. This happens, but it doesn't have to. You can use the File, Recover, Autosave feature in Blender to look for Blender's automatically saved scene backups. Or you can go to wherever on your computer you saved your blend file to look for Blend 1 or Blend 2 files, which are backups of your blend files Blender automatically creates. Just rename these files from Blend 1, Blend 2, or whatever they're called to just .blend so you can open those files in Blender. But to avoid losing individual animations, textures, and other data blocks you've created, let's talk about fake users really quick. You might have seen this shield icon in Blender. That represents the fake user feature, which essentially keeps a data block saved in your blend file even when it has no real quote-unquote users. When this shield icon is activated, an F appears before its name, indicating that the data block, such as an animation or texture you created in your scene, will not be deleted. As a result, whenever you're making new textures, animations, or geometry nodes in your scene, make sure to click the shield icon next to it in order to keep the file protected from deletion, as sometimes Blender doesn't realize that you're using that data block and will accidentally delete it. Another great way to guard against losing that kind of data though is by saving incrementally, using the hotkey Ctrl+Alt+S in order to make sure you're keeping incremental backups of your scene as you continue working on it and modifying it. One of the absolute best time-saving Blender habits you'll ever develop, however, is just getting in the habit of pressing Ctrl+S to save your Blender scene every minute or two. Plus, saving to a location on your computer that is automatically backed up to the cloud, for example, a Google Drive folder, a OneDrive folder, or a Dropbox folder, protects you against the risk of hard drive failure, data corruption, or accidentally saving over a previous version of your blend file that you'd like to return to. I kid you not, as I was editing the audio for this section, I realized that the outro of this video's audio was accidentally overwritten like an hour ago. I tried undoing as many times as I could to get it back, but all my editing work was just gone. And thankfully, because I had cloud saved this Premiere project, I was able to go back to a save that was saved to the cloud about an hour or two ago, download it, copy and paste the audio from that part into this newer version of the project. This is not an advertisement. I'm not being paid to say this. I just am a really, really strong believer in saving your projects to the cloud. It will save you so many hours of headaches. I use Google Drive for this, and I use this to return to previous versions of blend files constantly. It's a really useful feature even when you are using incremental saves. For this problem, I'm strictly talking about non-photorealistic or stylized 3D models and textures, just like the low poly ones that I create on this channel. If your textures are looking great on their own but look off when they're actually applied to your 3D model, try the following. Color management in Blender ensures your renders look realistic, accurate, and consistent across different display types and software. It translates the scene linear light values into what your monitor can actually show, which prevents washed out or overly bright images. However, I make stylized characters and renders personally, which means I don't care about any of that. Because of that, I want to use the standard color management option so that the color values on our textures closely match up with the colors that we see in Blender. Using an emission as your shader helps with this too, because when we set the value to 1 and turn off the scene lights in scene world when we're using the Eevee render engine, it'll match our texture's color and brightness values 1:1, which is what I usually want. Just again, make sure you're using Eevee as your render engine, turn off ray tracing, shadows, scene lights, and your scene world in order to get a very accurate representation of what your textures look like applied to your 3D model. But if you're doing something stylized with actual shading and shadows, another really important thing to understand are normals. Imagine a paper-thin, flat surface that has two sides. A normal in 3D modeling is essentially a line that sticks straight out of that flat surface that is perpendicular to it. This tells the computer which side of that surface is the outside. Our 3D models are made up of flat surfaces that are called faces, and each of those faces has its own normal. To visualize normals in Blender, enter Edit Mode, then go to the Overlays dropdown and click the Normals option. You can adjust the size of these normals for better visibility in that same menu dropdown. Understanding normals is really helpful when troubleshooting shading problems, as well as when using custom shading setups in Blender, either using normal maps or the data transfer modifier. If you are purely interested in making style stylized renders like me, you can prevent this issue by going to the File, Defaults, and Save Startup File option in Blender. This saves you an incredible amount of time and frustration in the long haul by setting up preferred defaults in Blender. If you change your render engine, color management settings, and even the default shader on your cube, then do the Save Startup File option, it will automatically load all of those settings every single time you open up Blender. And it will declutter your scene if you never use things like the camera, the default light, or the default cube that Blender starts with. And this will also save the way you set up your panels in Blender, so it can really optimize your workflow by saving your preferred workspace. Can your model just not be rigged at all? Usually you get this issue after a bone heat weighting error. To fix this, select all the objects in your scene you'd like to rig, then press Ctrl+A to apply all transforms before rigging. Another important thing to check before rigging is to select all verts in edit mode, press M, and then click the Merge by Distance option. Adjust your distance if needed. And with all your objects selected, pressing Shift+N to recalculate normals can also help sometimes. Having n-gons on your model can also cause similar problems and should be avoided. Remember, you can see how many n-gons your model has by going to Edit Mode, and going to Face Select, then pressing the Select dropdown, finding the Select by Trait option, and then clicking Faces by Sides, setting your vertices to 4, and your type to greater than with Extend disabled. That will automatically select all the n-gons on your model. Now you can easily turn those n-gons into quads or tris in order to avoid rigging issues. With all that done, now you can try parenting your rig to your mesh, which should now work as expected. But what if, for example, you moved the hand on your model and the hair of your character or even its shoes followed along with it? That kind of issue, however, is fixed by weight painting. To understand how to fix weight painting errors, we need to first explain vertex groups. Vertex groups in Blender are groups of vertices used to weight paint vertices to a model's geometry. The values these vertex groups have on your model's vertices determine how much influence a bone on your rig has on those vertices during an animation. Vertex groups are essential for creating smooth deformations in character rigging and animation. Now let me show you a super useful trick. By selecting your model, going to Edit Mode, and clicking on any of its vertices, in the Item tab under Vertex Weights, you'll actually be able to see every single vertex group that has any influence on that selected vert, and you can even change their values from here. You can use this to find which vertex weights are being wrongfully applied to any part of your model in order to resolve weight painting issues. And what I personally like to do to solve many weight painting issues is that making sure that auto normalize is enabled, I'll find the vertex group on my model that is problematic and use the gradient tool at 50 to 100% opacity to fill in my model. If it's a symmetrical part of my model, however, like my shoes or hands, I'll make sure to enable X symmetry at the top of the 3D viewport before I weight paint anything. While weight painting issues are not 100% preventable, make absolutely sure that you keep auto normalize checked and enabled before you do any weight painting so that your weight values cannot go above 1. In fact, you might want to change your auto normalize setting in your startup scene and save it, because you're going to want to keep this enabled in order to avoid a lot of weight painting headaches. For the final Blender tip of this video, rather than go over specific Blender issues that may come up, let's go over 3 extremely useful tools that you can use in order to save untold amounts of time and frustration throughout your Blender journey. First, let's start with F3 search. If you've ever forgotten a hotkey, you know how frustrating that is, but F3 search essentially eliminates that problem. It is incredibly helpful for beginners because it provides a quick, searchable menu of practically every Blender operation. This saves you time because you'll no longer need to memorize hotkeys or menu locations, because you won't have to hunt through complex menus or remember obscure keyboard shortcuts. All you need to do is press F3, then search the name of the action. The hotkey of the action will be displayed right next to it, and it can even help you discover new Blender features. For example, if you want to extrude, subdivide, or do something with a material, all you have to do is search that operation, and you're going to see so many relevant options immediately. So instead of getting stuck trying to find a specific tool or hotkey, use search to save you a bunch of time. But now let's talk about quick favorites. Quick favorites in Blender are incredibly helpful for beginners because they allow you to create a personalized, context-sensitive menu right next to your mouse of your most used tools and operations. You can add any action in Blender to this menu at any time by right-clicking on the action and clicking the Add to Quick Favorites button. Now, whenever you press Q, you're going to have an option to use that at any time. This saves you so much time by reducing menu hunting so that you won't have to navigate multiple submenus to find a specific tool, and it will streamline your workflow by having essential tools readily available, meaning you can establish a more fluid and efficient workflow and helps you stay focused on your creative tasks. The last thing I wanted to talk about was Blender's 3D cursor, origin points, and transform orientations. In Blender, the 3D cursor is the spawn point for new objects and acts as a precision snap target for various modeling operations. The object origin, however, is the pivot point for rotations and scaling, and having a misplaced object origin can cause really strange rotations. If you ever need to fix your object's origin, all you need to do is go to the Object tab at the top of the 3D viewport, click on Set Origin, and then you use one of these many options in order to fix it. What's really useful though is you can use the hotkey Shift+S to snap your 3D cursor to your object, or do the opposite, snap your object to your 3D cursor. This is useful when you want to spawn objects at specific locations or move objects to exact positions. All you need to do is select any vertex, edge, or face that you'd like to move in edit mode, then press Shift+S, cursor to selected. That will move your 3D cursor to your selection, but if you'd like to do the opposite, click on Selection to Cursor to move your selection to your 3D cursor. You can even move the exact position of your 3D cursor if you'd prefer by pressing N, going to the View tab, and adjusting the location and rotation values of your 3D cursor right here. This also works in object mode if you'd like to move whole objects this way. Another important aspect of manipulating objects when modeling and animating are the transform orientations that you can switch between at the top of the 3D viewport. Blender's default transform orientation is global. Global is the world's fixed coordinate system, which is the same for all objects in your scene. The local axis, however, is unique to each object in your scene and changes as the object rotates in object mode. Note that the object's local axis does not change when rotating your object in edit mode because the actual rotation values on your object remain the same when rotating in edit mode. The normal transform orientation even allows you to transform parts of your object based on the direction of the normals on your model's faces, which is extremely useful for many modeling operations. Transform orientations give you precise control over your objects and prevents hours of frustrating modeling and animating, so I highly recommend keeping these in mind while you're modeling. Always double check your transform orientation in the 3D viewport whenever you run into weird rotations or object movement or need to do something a little bit more precise. Before we close out this section though, whenever you're having Blender issues, here's a quick checklist that you can screen cap and reference whenever problems arise. But now let's move on to the final section of this video. I asked the experienced Blender artists in my Discord server what advice they'd give themselves when they were first starting out using Blender. And I received so many valuable responses that I've boiled down into 4 categories. Let's get right into how you can apply all this incredible advice to your own work for years to come. Making sure to watch good Blender tutorials on YouTube was actually one of the most common pieces of advice I saw, but I can tell that you're already doing a really great job with that part. Ideally, you're going to watch high quality tutorials that break down the fundamentals behind what you're creating so that you can use the skills you're learning to make your own creations. That's exactly what I try to do with the tutorials on this channel, so make sure to subscribe and like this video if you're finding this useful so far. But while tutorials are essential for speeding up your Blender learning, don't front load a ton of tutorials before you get started making stuff of your own. The information learned won't stick unless you develop your own understanding through creative action. When you're first learning Blender, don't worry about add-ons when you're starting out. While raking and UV unwrapping add-ons can be really nice to have and save you a bunch of time, it's often best to learn how to do things in default Blender before learning how to use add-ons that accomplish essentially the exact same tasks but faster. It's best to understand the fundamentals before jumping to a shortcut. Another common piece of advice was to take the time to learn the most basic Blender shortcuts. That's going to be things like using S to scale, R to rotate, G to move, and X, Y, and Z for locking movement along those axes. Don't try to memorize all the shortcuts in one go though. Just keep making projects and you'll memorize them through repetition. My Blender modeling hotkey guide that is included in my full character modeling course covers all the hotkeys that are most important for 3D modeling and will save you a lot of time. Again, link to the course is in the description below. I see so many people in my comments say they want to learn 3D modeling, but they suck at drawing and couldn't possibly draw a turnaround drawing. Or maybe they love 3D modeling, but just can't rig or UV unwrap their characters to save their life. But the reality is that everyone sucks at these things when they first start out. If you told me I'd be teaching 3D modeling and rigging full-time a few years ago, I would laugh because I genuinely considered myself terrible at those things back then. All of these skills like drawing, coloring, 3D modeling, texturing, rigging, and animating are all learnable skills, and learning them is often easier than you might expect. After all, you're watching this tutorial on YouTube, which has thousands of excellent tutorials on learning how to draw, texture, 3D model, animate, and more. With that said, of course, it is important not to overwhelm yourself when initially learning Blender, and to just learn one thing at a time. And yes, if you don't enjoy a certain skill, don't force yourself to learn it. You don't have to be a jack of all trades, but just don't be scared to learn things like animation, rigging, texturing, modifiers, or shaders. The resources are out there. You can learn them and make the model, animation, or game of your dreams. I believe in you. You got this. But if hearing all that makes you wish there's a more sequential, guided tour through all the fundamental skills required to use Blender and create your own rigged and textured characters, check out my Gumroad course that teaches my full workflow for creating any low poly character that's perfect for beginners. We break down concepts such as the fundamentals of character design, drawing turnaround sheets, painting textures, 3D modeling, rigging, animating your character, and even more in an easy to digest structure. And my low poly course is on sale until October 31st. So in order to lock in the absolute best possible deal, make sure to get it today. Link is in the description below this video. One of my favorite pieces of advice that I received was to just ball with it. Don't stress about the right way to do things in Blender. If it works, it works. Your first model will be your worst model. Stick through your first dozen terrible models so you can start making good ones. Never be afraid of failure because your continued learning will result in growth over time. Avoid burnout by completing the stress response cycle. If you don't know what that is, I made a video about it right here and you should definitely check it out if you struggle with anxiety or burnout. And in a similar vein, make sure to take regular breaks and pace yourself. If you're low on sleep, stressed, or anxious, you're putting a huge impediment on your ability to create and learn new things in general. This is a process we're supposed to enjoy and have fun with, so remember to relax and focus on the process. Remember that Blender is an art form and a journey. This last category might be the most important advice that was shared over and over again. And that is firstly to start with a rough plan before you open Blender. 5 minutes of planning can save you hours of time. While Blender is really good at making your ideas real, it isn't necessarily the best tool for planning and refining your ideas or coming up with new creative ideas. That's where writing and doodling come in. When you feel inspired to open up Blender, first spend a minute or two writing down some ideas of what you'd like to create and your goals for the project. And if you enjoy drawing, thumbnail out some sketches of what you'd like to create and include some notes in the margins. Just this little bit of planning will save you untold amounts of time in the long run. And similarly, the ultimate cheat code to speed up your learning is to study from high quality artists and 3D models from websites such as ArtStation, the Models Resource, and Sketchfab. When you include searching up references into your planning process to break down how the pros build their models and texture their work, the quality of your models will jump light years beyond what you thought was possible. And finally, don't just make models, make projects that excite you. Because when you're passionate about what you're making, you'll stick it out even when you hit roadblocks or get frustrated. Plus, project-based learning is just far more valuable because it moves you to the stage of Blender learning beyond passive information consumption. While YouTube tutorials show you a solution, an actual modeling or animation project forces you to discover your own. And going through this process of making projects builds exceptionally useful Blender skills, like how to problem solve as you encounter unexpected problems and figure out how to resolve them on your own, as well as the critical thinking skills you'll pick up as you learn to evaluate different approaches using Blender and choose the best one that works for you, rather than just following along with the single guided path a tutorial gives you. Plus, it gives you very valuable project management and research skills that'll help you learn to plan, organize, and manage your time to complete complex designs, and the ability to find and creatively synthesize information from multiple different sources, not just one tutorial video. This was the overwhelming feedback I received after hosting the 1024 challenge earlier this year, where you were challenged to make a low poly character model with 1024 triangles or less. So many people on Discord shared that while they've followed along with Blender tutorials before, they've made the donut, actually going through the process of making their own character model taught them so much more than simply following along with a tutorial ever could. Even though following along with those tutorials helped build their fundamental skills, actually going through the process of making their own model from scratch got them out of tutorial hell and got them into learning and making their own stuff so much faster. So next time you finish a guided Blender tutorial, make a project that's somewhat similar to the tutorial you followed so that you gain a deeper understanding through exploring the real world challenges and problems that come up when creating these 3D models, rigs, and animations. But that about covers it. I know that's a lot of information, so I hope that this video can serve as a guide that you can repeatedly revisit throughout your Blender journey. Make sure to download the free companion guide to this video that is linked in the description below so that you can keep it right next to you as you're modeling, 3D animating, and rigging in Blender. And if you want more of a guided tour through Blender that covers all the various fundamental skills you need in order to make your own characters, check out my Gumroad course that teaches my full workflow for creating low poly characters. It's perfect for beginners and breaks down complex topics such as the fundamentals of character design, drawing character turnarounds, painting textures, rigging, animating your character, and more in an easy to digest structure. The price of this course increases on October 31st, so make sure to get it today if you're interested. Link is in the description box below this video. Now go make something awesome. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.